Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Two Bad Nurses podcast. I am Yomi Richardson.
Hi, I'm Lisa Heath. Hi, everyone.
Hello, Lisa. How's it going?
It's going good. Still hot.
I'm telling you, I did a TikTok, California, this weather, the extremes of the weather, but it's been so hot out here, triple digits. But y'all got some rain.
We did, but it was still like 90s, which next week our forecast shows 80s. And I'm like, oh, it's a cold front coming in. We're going to be like, maybe
How's
I
the
could take the
humidity?
kids out.
I'm telling you, the humidity
It's bad.
is bad. Yeah. I feel like the Midwest, we have real humidity out there, and it can be humid out here in California, but nothing compared to the Midwest where you're just drenched.
You're drenched. You're drenched. You feel like you're in water, it just, I'm
Mm-hmm.
ready for it to be over. I'm not ready for the bad winters, but I mean, I'll take a 50-degree day, a 60-degree day.
Yeah,
I'm hoping for like 70s before it gets cold, like
I'm
just
telling
to
you.
be able to go out for a walk with your dog and not your dog not feel like they're about to pass out.
I know the dog panting and everything. At least I have that hope to look forward to. We kind of don't. We're just at the mercy of God on what we get from one month to the next. So, but it is what it is. But at least I got a couple questions for you.
Okay.
So we didn't talk about this beforehand, but
You always get me like that.
I
You never
know,
talk
right?
about
And
it.
see, and
Catch
I
me
didn't
off guard.
say,
Okay.
and I didn't say anything to you. So I got a question.
Okay.
Is marriage a contract, a covenant, or both? And so the background was it's a porn star, and she was trending on social media because she was saying that marriage is a covenant. It's a contract, and she has statistics like Tom Brady. But I said, let me ask Lisa, contract,
I
covenant,
say,
or both?
yeah, my answer is both.
I agreed with you.
Both. Yeah, it's covenant for
Hmm.
sure. You go before God till death do you part, you say
Hmm.
your vows. I feel that the contract part comes in because before you get married, both people are supposed to be on the same page as far as the what's delegated in the marriage.
Hmm.
Are you the person that likes to cook? Maybe you're going to cook, or you're the person that likes to clean house, or you're the person. So you guys decide who's going to what the tasks are that are going to
Hmm.
be done, and you guys have basically a working contract. You know what to expect. He's always going to do this, I'm always going to do this, and if I'm out of town or something, you may have to pick up that. I may need to pick up some slack, but you know, I take the kids to school every day, you pick them up. I mean, to me, that's kind of a contract.
You know what? And as you're talking, I was thinking, like, where do we pick up on that? Because people will have these very gendered roles in terms of what women do, what men don't do in relationships, and how they show up in that relationship. And it leads to usually women having to bear all burdens in the household because the
Yeah.
men, they'll say, oh, I don't feel like I'm this way with kids, or I can't pick up children. That's odd, a little bit odd, very odd to me. Let me be honest, very odd.
It is. And like, if you don't live together before you're married, which, we're not
Hmm.
supposed to, but,
Hmm.
if you don't talk about it or live together and live it, then it's really hard. Those are things that you have to go in and say, have those conversations before marriage. So what are your strengths? What do you like to do?
Hmm.
I like to cook. Like for me, I really don't care about cooking, but my husband did. He loved to cook. And
Hmm.
so I was like, okay, well, you go and take over cooking then. And so it didn't have to be the gender role, but he didn't really like having to pick up the kids and go take them to people like sleepovers and stuff, because he's like, I don't want to meet the moms, and they really want to talk to other moms, and I really don't want. So
Hmm.
I took on that role of like school activities and things like that. But if I'm not available, if I have to work, then he'll do it.
Yeah, I think it's
Same
the
thing with
even
cooking. If he
balance.
can't do it, I will.
I'm sorry, say that
It has
last.
to be about it. No, if he doesn't want to cook, or if he's not available to cook, I just have to, you
Hmm.
know. Um, it's something that I think it's give and take. Marriage is give and take, and if it's something you don't want to do and he majority does it, but you sometimes have to do it, that's part of it,
That's what I agree to.
especially when it comes
Balance.
Yeah, when it comes to running a household, you got to do what makes it work. And that's what I find has worked in the past anyway.
Yeah, I don't know if that's happening in these new households. From some of the stories that I hear, the women seem to be bearing a lot of burdens, and then that can factor into these young women's perception in terms of being married and, oh, I don't want to be married and, be connected to this, a spouse that doesn't do this. Just like what you said there, I feel like people have eyes. And if you have eyes to see that your loved one, I don't care, man or woman, is cleaning a house for 8 hours a day, and y'all have the resources to get a housekeeper in there to help whoever that person is that's cleaning. Like person, looking at, I don't know. Some people just they don't see it that way. It's just the role. But I agree with you. I feel like it's both contract,
Yeah,
covenant. It's a covenant before God. It's a
yeah,
contract with the state. We upholding both of them till death do us part.
yeah.
That's
It's both
crazy.
of them, right?
We try. So, okay, I agree. I got one more question for you. So I did a TikTok
Okay.
okay, let me just say it though. Healthcare providers TikToking on the clock. What are your thoughts? And I'm talking about not just filming, but they dancing, they doing the latest bops and trends, even during procedures.
I don't agree.
Hmm.
I don't agree unless they're on break, on their lunch break or on their break, because you're there to provide a service to patients. There's patients involved. So if you have time to TikTok, maybe they need to look at staffing. Maybe you're overstaffed, because I know when I was in the hospital, I didn't have time to TikTok or barely go to the bathroom, because your patients are number one. And you got to look at it as if you're the patient and these are the nurses doing this over in the, whatever, in the recovery room, in the operating room, wherever. I just don't agree with it. I mean, it's all good to have fun at work, and you guys can talk to your coworkers, laugh. It's great to be able to have that camaraderie at work, right? And on breaks. But while you're supposed to be working, I just don't think so. I think that um, we need to be there doing what we're supposed to do, because that opens the door that if something went wrong that day with a patient that may have nothing to do with you, but they're like, oh, this is the hospital. Oh, you see, these are the nurses that are TikToking. She got surgery and she ended up with an infection. You could have been in a whole different operating room, but they're going to tie it together.
Hmm.
They're going to somehow link those two things together. This is what the nurses are doing here. It could
Yes.
not even, that you could have 5 ORs and this happening in OR1, and a person in OR2 had a surgery where they accidentally operated on the wrong knee.
Hmm.
And the doctor's apologizing, it was a mistake, they didn't do the timeout in the operating room, whatever. But because you did this in another operating room and it's the same hospital, same facility, it's going to tie back and make that hospital look really bad.
Yeah. So, oh, you done brought up a couple of different points here. Look, we have one topic, but this may actually take it up. So it was a doctor, Dr. Catherine Roxanne of Ohio, Catherine Roxanne Grove of Ohio. And Lisa, what she did, she was TikToking during, she said that she obtained consent from the patients to TikTok and that they were agreeable to it. But she was TikToking during liposuction and she perforated the woman's bowels. Now, I don't know if she was physically dancing. So the TikToks that were showing like she was dancing and, just doing too much, in my opinion. And so she perforated the woman's bowel and ended up losing her license, revoked in behind this. And so that's the TikTok that I did on it. And I'm like, one, when we're talking about consent, I'm not giving you consent to be TikTok endured. If you're going to show my procedure, I may be okay with that, but not for you to be dancing. And, these people, they clout chasing and they want to be stars. And this was a physician. And the second point that you're bringing up, as nurses, we would have said something if our doctor was TikToking to what you're saying. You have put it in a
Absolutely.
nursing perspective, but we would have said something like, what are you doing? Like, no. And to stop it.
It Yeah, it is different when you're in a hospital, in a teaching hospital, and you have several residents up in the gallery or whatever, looking down, watching so they can learn. That's the consent to have people watch.
Yes.
You're doing it as a teaching to learn, but not as entertainment on social media Absolutely, I'm against it
Mm,
100%,
I agree with that.
because too many things can go wrong. As you see, something went wrong. Your focus is not where it should be. And if you're operating on me, I need your focus to be exactly where it needs to be. No dance moves, please.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is I'm gonna try. So my goal this week is to do shorts. This is gonna be a short, but you just said right there, no dance moves, please. Like, no, we're not
Mm-mm,
here for that. Like, what are we doing?
mm-mm.
And when we think about the hospital where we got our training from, I feel like it just prepared us because remember the conditions and the accountability that we had from both our nursing peers and then from our physician colleagues, especially in that MSICU. Remember, because the surgeons wanted their patients in surgical ICU, medicine wanted overall medicine. So here we had this mixed unit when it opened up, and it was like, okay, who are the nurses over here? So I felt like we were having to prove ourselves to say that, okay, we can't take care of these patients. And
Right.
I felt like we were very no nonsense. I mean, we didn't have social media at that time, but remember, we could only read academic journals on the unit. We couldn't have magazines out on the unit. But now that's completely
No,
changed.
the worst thing I think we could have done is, or that we did, is we would at night, if we were working night shift and everybody was, taken care of, we might play a joke on each other and send in the tube thing, send it to another unit and put a bunch of
Yes,
confetti in it, and they'd get it and
yes,
open it up, and that was like it, you know what I mean? But that's not like, that was like a minute. It wasn't taken away from patient care. The other things were we could have a TV in the break room or something and maybe watch South Park.
right,
You know, that
right,
was, ooh, we're watching South Park.
right.
It was,
Lisa,
but
that
we
was your
love,
show. You
that was
love
my
Cartman.
show. I love
You
Cartman,
love
but it
Cartman.
was, but it was our break time or, downtime. It wasn't like, oh, I'm in here helping somebody start an art line or something, but hey, I'm moving to, no, no. And I think it's ridiculous. Everybody wants fame. Everybody wants fame for just doing their job and making it funny. And I'm guilty. I scroll through TikTok and laugh all day long, but taking care of patients is not a form of entertainment to me.
No,
It's not. It's
no. And definitely at that
it,
hospital, because we were dealing with it was a level 1 trauma center. So we were getting multiple patients with multiple gunshot wounds, literally leaking from everywhere, tubes coming from everywhere. And by the time that attending surgeon would come around and ask you the various outputs from the respective drains and from the chest tubes and how we were grilled and to be held accountable for patients, like our singular focus had to be on that patient. And from that grounding, I took that all the way out here to California. And when I never slept before I had to go take care of work in the ICU, even dialysis, I never slept because I didn't know what I was encountering, especially if I was a charge or resource nurse. And I didn't get there. I wasn't on their plan. You can't find a colleague from Missouri to here that's going to say, oh, Yomi was on the unit joking and I was so serious when I was taking care of my patients because of what was ingrained at the hospital that we got our training at.
right. And when you're not in work mode and you're not assessing a patient or you're not doing a procedure or you're not teaching, and there's downtime, everybody has downtime sometimes at work, then it's okay to joke a little bit, talk a little bit, and you may see things that are hilarious to you. Your coworkers can laugh about it, but you got to be careful. Like we would even be careful when we got into the elevator. If we're talking about something in private and we're going down into the elevator, girl, yeah, and then other people come on the elevator, you just shut up
Right.
because you don't know. That could be their aunt, their niece, their daughter. That could be anybody, and they're hearing you talk. And I get into hospitals right now, and I get into the elevator, and I hear nurses talking all the time, and I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, you have no idea who I am.
Right.
And you're telling all about this person. Oh, room 204. I could I could have just left room 204.
Right.
So you've
But
got to be careful.
why does that have to be a policy? Because then this is where I kind of get irritated because, or to me, this is common sense. But organizations will have these big stickers saying, please respect patient privacy, the shh, or, they'll send out these policies and it's part of our annual hospital training.
Oh
in
yeah,
terms of patient privacy. Why do we need that in this day and age? Like, that's
because
just
there's
common sense.
common sense isn't very common anymore.
True. We grew up knowing that. Yeah.
It's just not. And especially with social media and everybody trying to get a like.
Yep.
The more outrageous you are, the more outside the box you are, the more daring it is, people
Mm-hmm.
are going to like it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's unfortunate.
It is. It is. And definitely because patient outcomes. And hopefully, like I don't know what she definitely lost her license. It was revoked permanently. But if we continue on in social media, and I had said on the TikTok that it wasn't our generation and it wasn't for us in the sense that for us who are older, because when we think about that intergenerational wisdom that comes from nurses, and even when we started and how we were, who we were taught by and how we were held accountable to kind of nursing standards, if we start lowering it down. So my thing was in TikTok, I said, how do we as a certain generation show up in younger spaces? We don't want to be outdated. Like, this is our whole platform. Like, we're still young, we're still connected to the culture, even though we have collectively about 50 something years of nursing experience. But how do we, as nurses who know better and came from a different generation, kind of hold the line on this foolishness and to call it out when we see
Yeah,
it?
but that's the thing. Yeah, the thing is calling it out.
Yeah.
Like, it's not cute. It's not cute. And I know that you think and maybe explaining to the younger generation, because you're so far away from critical illnesses, right? Because you don't feel that. You're young, you're vibrant. I mean, when we were in our 20s, death and emphysema and all these things, diabetes, they just weren't part of what we thought about every day
Mm-hmm.
until you get in your late 40s, 50s and start having joints pains and things like that. And you start experiencing death, you start experiencing friends, family, and all of those dying, and in the healthcare field, in the hospital, inpatient. Then you can relate because now you're on the other side and you have a family member who's in there, and you can see how you would feel while you're in there so worried about this person or about yourself if they're taking it all as a joke.
Right.
That and so just explaining that, I think, to them, because it's hard when you're in the mindset, you're so young, everything is so distant, it's far away.
Mm-hmm. And that was when I
Yeah,
worked at in the ER. That's kind of where I'll tell people to this day, I had an epiphany when I worked in the ER, to that very point that you're making, because we were getting gunshot wounds that were coming in, young men that were the same age as my significant other. And I would always remember thinking, like, wow, because we lived in that very community, like, wow, this could be my significant other. And so for me at that time, I used to always have to be right. And he told me, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And do you want people to want to be around you and get along? And that was really between that, being confronted with that reality, and then what I was seeing at work. And I was like, whoa, it could be any of us, especially like with the snow injuries, the motor vehicle
yeah,
accidents, gunshot wounds in particular. And that really kind of, like you're saying, brought it home to me, like this could affect any of us. And so now, how do we treat those that we love, and then the care that we provide patients?
yeah. And there can be a downside to us working in the ICU at a young age or in the ER, because we're seeing all of the bad things that happen. We're seeing everything. So when our kids are late for curfew, when our husbands are a few minutes late, we're automatically picking up the phone call. Do you have a patient in the ER by the, I mean, you're like thinking something happened. Oh my gosh, did he have his license? He's going to be a John Doe. Oh, you think all these things, and everybody's like, chill.
Yes.
And it's true. Sometimes there's got to be a balance, because this is all we thought about. And so I would have to have my family have me take it down a notch. Like,
Mhm.
come on.
Are
We
you
still
able
got to
to?
live life.
Are you able to this day?
Now,
Hmm.
I think I am now, because now, being in hospice for so many years and realizing death is a part of life. It's not when you die, it's how you die. And are you surrounded by loved ones? Is it peaceful? I'm not scared of death like I used to be. Like, I'd always be like, oh, you could die, that was. I'm not scared of it like that because I know it's going to happen. I'm at that age where I know it's going to happen, and I just want us to be healthy and do the best we can. And when it's our time to go, are we surrounded by our loved ones? Is it pain free? All those things are what matters to me. So I can kind of take it down a notch and be like, God has a plan for all of us. I don't automatically think the worst
Mm-hmm.
anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But
I'm
that
still
came with age.
trying. I'm doing better but it's funny because if I have some kind of ailment, I always go to the worst case scenarios because that's what we saw in the ICU. And we were taking
Hmm.
care of young women that were my age at the time that had stage 4 cervical cancer that had metastasized everywhere. And then what that was looking like in the ICU. So
Yeah.
now, for a number of years, I thought I had lupus because of
Yeah.
joints and then some kind of clinical inflammatory markers that I was having. But Courtney told me, he said, do you notice that it's when you get off of your stretch of days working that your joints are hurting? He said, instead of diagnosing yourself, maybe it's connected to patient care. And it never came to my mind. And I thought about it and I said, I think you're right. And when I went into it with that mind frame, I saw. And when I was actually turning patients and how I'm hyperextending my wrist and looking at how I'm, setting myself up for injury, I'm like, yeah, this is why my hands are swollen and my feet. But because we see the best of the worst, as I would always say, my mind would always go. But then I stopped because I said, okay, Lord, I'm not operating in faith if I'm going to the worst case scenario.
Right.
But
Right.
but I liked how you said there, kind of segueing. It's not when you die, but how you die, because we see that so much, and that can go off into a different pathway there.
Mhm.
But I just want to highlight that.
Yeah. And we saw trauma. We
Mm-hmm.
saw a guy going just out to the grocery store and getting hit T-boned by a car and never is the same again. We saw someone just going out to the club for the night and getting shot. Those are unexpected things, and you don't have time to prepare to grieve. Whereas in hospice, you're diagnosed, you have preparation time to grieve, and there's what is it, anticipatory grief, I think that's
Mm-hmm.
what it's called, where you're grieving before a person even passes because you know what's coming and you have time to plan. And then you can choose to make those days beautiful, or you can worry and you can stress and you can, but it took 20 years of me being in this field to finally feel, this is going to happen someday. It's how it happens. It could happen like that, how when we were back there, where it was an accident, you never know. Or it could be something that we're diagnosed with, and we have time to plan and get our affairs in order and spend time with our family and laugh. And they have all the times to talk to us and tell us how great of a mom I was, or, whatever. And I have all my girls around me, and that's fulfilling. So knowing that's how I pray that I die,
Mm-hmm.
surrounded by loved ones,
Girl.
not in pain. you know I don't want to be in pain, and so I don't automatically go to the worst. I think about, when it's my time, it's my time, but I can use my brain to make sure I'm not putting myself at risk,
Mm-hmm.
in the areas or things that I do. But eventually what's going to happen will come, and I just have to prepare and be knowledgeable, but yet not take it overboard when it comes to my kids.
Yeah, girl, I'm telling you. So
Yeah.
you see how just how we were able to touch on one thing and it literally segued through almost
Yeah.
20 years of nursing experience. Literally, we went from our origins in nursing to where we are present day. But that's the
Right.
beautiful thing
Right.
about this podcast and being experienced in nursing to where we can see the connections, whether it's in life, in death, in social media, and again, our patient outcomes, but then the outcomes for ourselves as well. So, yeah, okay, good
For
discussion.
sure.
I'm gonna think a couple more questions the next time.
Okay. Well, girl, you give some good ones, and you sure don't give me any warning.
I know I didn't. I sure don't. But okay, so let's get into what our topic is today, and this is the strike. And so, Lisa, I was out walking. So here in California, everybody knows that the Screen Actors Guild and that um, the Writers Guild of America, are under strike, and so I don't know. What does that mean to y'all in the Midwest? Have you heard anything about it, or what does that mean?
Yeah, I've definitely heard about them wanting, from what I understand, there's a lot of changes that have happened with the new streaming platforms, and they're not being paid the same as how it used to be. And they're wanting better compensation. And there's a fight, I guess, going on about that.
Yes. So being out here in California, I think it's the writers. Yes, the writers before, and I should have looked up what year, but the writers before had a strike to where they walked out for several months. And I hope I can remember, if we can remember to talk about that part, because the goal here is to look at the writer strike and then parallel it to healthcare. And I know for us, when we've at the organization that I work for that's gone on strike, it's usually just been for a couple of days. But what was notable to me about the entertainment industry strike is that they'll be out there for months. And so what I was looking at when I was walking, I listened to a bunch of podcasts. And so Bakari Sellers, he did a podcast with Roy Wood Jr., who is a comedian and an actor. And they were talking about, it's called The Writers and Actors Strike, and it's with Roy Wood Jr. on his podcast. And I would encourage everybody to go check it out, because when I was listening to it, it gave me a completely different perspective and insight into what is going on with this strike. And then again, I was connecting it to healthcare, and I'm like, wow, it's just kind of the same. But some of the issues that he brought up is that one is the outsourcing of work. And he specifically mentioned in terms of scripts. So when we think about writers, and it was one time where I was working out at the gym, and these two men were talking, and I was listening to them. And Lisa, what they were doing, they were talking about different characters in a script. And so I was fascinated, because I was like, man, who are they talking about? Like, whose life is this? But they said this character, and I'm like, wow. But it was such a really an awe-inspiring process for me to hear. And literally they were saying, oh, this person will do this, and they were literally building it out and looking at kind of alternative scenarios, and okay, if this happens, what does this look like? So when you outsource these scripts to artificial AI, artificial intelligence, the AI, you can just plug something in and they will now come up with an entire script. So this is the replacement of a human who would normally do this job. We're now replacing it with the AI. And what they also mentioned was CGI, which is this computer generated imaging. And the example that he gave was like in 42, the movie with Chadwick Boseman, that they can have people, he said, realistically, there's no way that you could feel like a Dodger Stadium full of people and start filming, especially when you need to do it for this particular scene. But what you do is you get a couple of people, and then you, through the CGI, that couple of people now fills up the whole stadium. So they just kind of keep building on their image. But where it goes wrong is they will now use that computer generated image into perpetuity. So the people who are that core group of creating now the fans in the stands, their image is now being used in perpetuity, and they're not being compensated for it. So kind of this outsourcing of work.
Right.
The second part that he brought up was the economic transparency in terms of residuals and syndication. And so what I looked up was with the Friends cast. And so we heard in real time to where Friends, they stuck together. David Schwimmer, he was the star of the show, and I didn't know that at that time. I never watched Friends, but he was the star of the show. We know that it was a really big deal among all people. Black people, I'll tell Black people I've never watched Friends, and they're like, what? No, you got to look at it. It's really good. But we know at that time, David Schwimmer, even though he was the biggest star, what he did was they all stuck together. And so they renegotiated when they saw that they had a successful series here. They stuck together, and they were able to get $1 million per episode. But present day, this Friends cast, they receive 2% of syndication, which is about 20 million a year per each of them. And Warner Brothers, who is the company, receives $1 billion annually from syndication of Friends. So if we're looking at 6 friends that were on the cast, that's about 120 million of $1 billion pie that's having to be paid out to the actors. And the point that really stuck out with me is that they stuck together. And so one person didn't let their celebrity get in their head. I don't know that we would see this nowadays, especially again, we were talking about clout and social media and how people want to be the star, but they were able to see a bigger picture that some may not see.
Yeah. And they've had such a long success story. I mean, and it shows. I mean, I watched the Friends reunion. They're still, I mean, they don't see each other as much, but I mean, you could just see the bond there. And it was so nice to see them sticking up for each other, you know. Even there was one Matt, no, not Matt LeBlanc, but I forgot the other guy's name. He had like a drug problem and had to go to rehab, and you know, but they were just still supportive, and like I said, I think this new age of everything changing, it's not like the days where you turn on channel 4, 5, and 9 and have your reruns and they're getting paid from that syndication. If they're on a streaming platform, it's usually the limited series, so it's just like 12 weeks or something like that. So it definitely, I'm sure economically it's hard on them.
And, you know, and I'm looking at him, was it Matthew Perry? I think he was the one that
Yes, that's his name.
And he was saying how various castmates, like he said, they're all good with each other. He said, but various castmates were more supportive, you know, I think just from life and the ability. Yeah. But in my mind, I can be a better friend to you if I have money and resources to be able to support you. And if I know that we got our money together. So nobody left one person behind, but we're all getting a share of the pie. To me, that can make for a better friend. Remove any kind of religious thoughts from it. But you know, you can be a better friend to somebody. So that's that point that you made right there. That kind of, I'm hearing that. On a different kind of perspective, I looked up and I saw what's called back-end royalties or performance royalties. And this is money received by actors or musicians when their craft is displayed, whether on movies or TV, radio. And the highest paid residual actors are the Friends cast. You have Jerry Seinfeld, who collects 30 to 40 million a year. Ray Romano and his TV series, 18 million a year in residuals or back-end royalties. Kelsey Grammer, net worth of 80 million. And in addition to that, he's collecting 13 million. Edie Falco from The Sopranos, 26 million. Betty White, 8 million. David Hasselhoff, 4 million a year. George Clooney, 500 million net worth, 13 million a year. And it goes on. And I think the last one I'll say is Ted Danson, Cheers, 5 million a year. So in addition to whatever wealth they've accumulated. So what immediately became obvious in that was that, one, there's no Black people or people of color that are represented in that. Edie Falco was the only woman. So with the exception of the Friends cast, women are marginally represented in that. And then when you look back at David Hasselhoff, Betty White, Ted Danson, so even back then, they were able to kind of still have access to this, to be able to get the ability to negotiate for these type of royalties. So it's a very small group here of people that we're talking about, in addition to like the studio heads that are earning money among actors.
Right. And if I remember, if I heard right, that the last time there was a strike like this, it was when Ronald Reagan was an actor. It was during that time. So we can go back, and he was president in the 80s. So I know it was before then. So sometime 60s or 70s, I would say, is when this before happened, you know? So it's definitely there's different reasons, there's different issues now.
Definitely.